All right.
Okay, we are now recording.
All right. Heary. The Parks Committee meeting for March 24th, 2021 is now in session. Roll call. Vice Chair Alder Weary.
Here.
Alder Gerlach.
Here.
Alder Brunette.
Here. Oh, Jesse.
Thank goodness. We were getting a little worried about you.
I'm here. I was doing dishes.
Oh. And Alder Scannell, the chair, is here. We are all present and accounted for. Can we take on the agenda yet, or?
Yeah, we're ready for the agenda.
Okay, motion to approve our agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Alder Gerlach, seconded by Alder Brunette. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have an agenda. I'll take a motion to approve our minutes from our last meeting.
So
Approve. Second.
Motion by Alder Weary, seconded by Alder Brunette. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Our minutes are now minuted. Let me know we can get on to regular business.
We are ready to go.
Okay. Item number 1, consideration with possible action on the request by St. John's Homeless Shelter to run a homeless support program at St. John's Park from April 30th, 2021 through November 1st, 2021.
Yeah, so the Parks Department has been involved over the last year as part of the City of Green Bay Homeless Task Force, along with the Community and Economic Development Department, the Police Department, the Mayor's Office, Brown County, and then other community members, partners, and organizations. So throughout the year, a lot of discussions revolved around the use of St. John's Park by the homeless population, and then the associated problems that came along with that. The challenges of the homeless patrons, combined with an unprecedented year with COVID, turned St. John's Park into a temporary housing alternative versus a place to engage with park users, program opportunities, and then leisure activities. And you noticed that last year if you drove past the park at all, you saw that there was a large presence of the homeless population throughout the entire summer months at St. John's Park. So one of the meetings the Homeless Task Force held was with the St. John's Homeless Shelter, since they're located directly across the street from St. John's Park. Throughout the last 2 years, they witnessed the challenges that the city has encountered as it relates to homelessness citywide and specifically at St. John's Park. So looking to be proactive and strategize to create a sustainable alternative stemming from the concerns of last year, the St. John's Homeless Shelter put together a proposal called Engage, which is being discussed tonight. So attached in your agenda packet, you'll find the proposal for this program. I hope that you all had a chance to really read that over thoroughly. We do have Lexi Wood here as in the Zoom meeting. She is the Executive Director of St. John's Homeless Shelter. And she's here to give a brief presentation on this Homeless Support Park program that they'd like to partner with the Parks Department on at St. John's Park this year. So I would recommend at this time you open the floor for Lexi so that she can provide the information to you and answer any questions that you may have. And then just so you know, we also have someone from the police department here. So Paul is here for questions you might have for the police department.
Motion to open the floor. Second.
Motion by Alder Burnett, seconded by Alder Weary. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The floor is now open. Lexi, it's all yours. Nice seeing you.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. Yeah, so really, Dan did a great job with kind of the setup. Is we as one small nonprofit here in the community have kind of that direct lens on what happened in St. John's Park last summer, just given our very close and basically immediate proximity. And so I understand with COVID, many people were working home and may not have been aware of all that was transpiring downtown, but there just became this unsheltered homeless group of individuals that were either choosing not to engage in local programs. There was some capacity around access to area shelters or area programs, I would say compounded by COVID. And yet, even if their name was on a waiting list, for example, with St. John's, we would call 17 names on the waiting list of individuals who are hanging out in the park, who are choosing not to come into our summer safe sleep program. And so every single summer we've watched kind of the dynamics of those summer months and watched these numbers continue to grow. I know the Homeless and Housing Coalition has certainly been giving this a lot of attention. I know the Homeless Outreach Team, part of the Basic Needs Coalition, has been giving this a lot of attention. I know City Hall has had the task force around it as well. And so the challenge for St. John's is the fact that this group of individuals were hanging out in the park during hours of operation, whether it was, our shelter case management services, Mica Center, Wellspring. The fact they were choosing to be in the park tells us they were not guests engaged in our programming. And yet we believe that we have both an opportunity and a responsibility to look to engage with individuals who are in need and try to find a way to build that rapport, to really loop them into services and get them connected to resources. And so even just as I look across this Zoom call today, there's a lot of different homeless and housing providers on the call. You have housing providers, you have shelters, you have medical care. And so we're all working together. And yet what you see is just this group of individuals who specifically in the summer months when the weather's pretty nice, become pretty resistant and reluctant to engage with programming that perhaps comes with supervision or certain expectations. And so we were just looking at the park. We saw the growing problem last summer. It was compounded by, I'd say, community members who were really looking to get involved and do the right thing and wanting to serve their neighbors in need. And yet it became this location where meals were getting dropped off, restaurants or pizza was getting delivered, clothes delivered, a grill showed up. And so it started to become this community that was making it more difficult to engage with individuals. And so at that time, we had staffed our shelter directly across the street with 2 full-time case managers who were just there to meet the needs, to be able to offer access to the bathroom because the bathrooms at St. John's Park had been locked up at that point, just looking to engage people, whether it was showers or mail or toiletries. And yet people were still resistant to walk across the street and engage. And so as a shelter, we kind of looked at it this winter and said, if we do nothing, we can expect that problem and the population is just going to grow in the park. And along with that, as you saw in the materials that we sent out, there were 131 police calls to that location last summer. There were instances of, certainly of drug use, of open intoxicants in the park. There were harassment calls. There was a sexual assault. And so certainly some extremely concerning behaviors within St. John's Park last summer. And so one option is just we kind of continue to do things as we've done them as homeless and housing providers. We continue to offer our services and hope people engage. We came at it with kind of what we would say is option number 2 is how do we get outside of the walls of how we've always done business? How do we come into this space, meet people maybe on their turf, on neutral ground, and look to build rapport in hopes that through that we can link them into whether it's our services at Mica Center, Wellspring, St. John's, or whether it's one of the other community resources as well. So that's option 2 is we do it differently. We roll up our sleeves and we get innovative about what that looks like. And then option 3 is, I guess, also on the table would be that we do nothing in terms of programming, but we basically accept that this is a spot where people are going to gather. Although my concerns there are if we just accept that this is a spot for unsheltered homelessness in the summer, that not only will we see police calls continue to increase and continue to see some of those concerning behaviors, but we'll start to see that unsheltered homeless population continue to grow to the point that we're going to lose the support of downtown residents and businesses who call this place home. And so all of that called us to reach out. I'd say both a responsibility we felt to the neighborhood, but also to individuals in need. We reached out to James Anderson at the city back in, I believe it was January initially, started conversations with the Parks Department. We looped in, the police department quickly. Will Peters was part of those conversations and just said, what could programming look like that's low barrier, that's engaging, but is also bringing a sense of supervision and accountability to individuals who are choosing to hang out in St. John's Park during the day. And so our proposal for programming brings our case management team. It brings our outreach worker who works with unsheltered homelessness. It brings all of those resources right into the park. It provides supervision and accountability and support to individuals who perhaps are resistant to come and engage in programs in one of our buildings right now. It gives community members some intentional ways to get involved if they want to support this need in the community. Now there's an avenue and there's a channel that's supporting the work of law enforcement, supporting the work of City Hall, supporting the work of homeless and housing providers, that they can come behind and offer resources in a way that we're all aligned. And certainly for individuals who are in need, for individuals experiencing homelessness, it provides access to support and to resources and hopefully engagement that will then help bridge that gap back into one of the programs of one of the providers with the Homeless and Housing Coalition. And so in the packet, you saw a pretty robust, I'd say, overview of what we're looking to do, that we'd be there daily. We'd provide the meals right in the park. We'd provide the cleanup, the maintenance, making sure there's no littering, that just by our presence there, we're trying to disrupt some of the negative behaviors that were happening in that park, but we're trying to do it in a very empowering, engaging kind of way. In the evening, we look to partner with local, whether it's churches or other social service agencies that can provide evening and weekend programming. Some of those programs geared more at families. It's really kind of open, but just to make sure that we are kind of, I don't want to say redeeming, but reestablishing this park as a value add for those residents and those businesses that call that neighborhood home. And so that's kind of the big overview. We'd be there 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. at St. John's each day, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. as a local service provider each day, closed on just the major holidays. Again, with the case management staff, with all of those resources, with those meals, and just trying to bring a little bit of structure and support to individuals in need. So with that, I can open it up to, certainly any questions you guys may have for me. I do have Matt somewhere. I think, yeah, there he is. I have Matt on the call. Matt's our Associate Executive Director, so he oversees all the day-to-day programming. So he's also a resource for you guys. But we are just here able to answer questions. And really, though, I would just say the heart behind this entire proposal is we want to partner with the city. We want to partner with law enforcement and patrol officers in the downtown area to be able to serve our community, but then also to, very specifically be able to serve people who currently aren't connected to resources. So with that, any questions or feedback that you may have? Alderman Galvin?
Thank you. This is looks like a lot of work was put into developing this program and getting it ready to go. My question would be, and maybe this might be more oriented towards the police, what happens if we run into an individual or individuals that want to use the park as it was used last year and do not want to work with or cooperate with St. John's staff that are working there?
So I don't know if you want me to weigh in first, just on, because I know some questions have been raised around this. I think the phrase thrown out there was a code of conduct. And so to speak to that specifically is this program is not a homeless intervention program. Really what we see this partnership being between those partners that I talked about earlier is we've kind of phrased it as this is a pilot program, adult parkee program, really geared at the adult user with a target population certainly being those who are experiencing homelessness. So that being said, we had talked early on about the need to sign what I believe has now been thrown out there as a code of conduct. That is the rules of city parks. Those are the ordinances that go along with city parks, specifically with St. John's Park. And so St. John's Park is identified as a no alcohol park. Those ordinances have to do with the hours of operation. They have to do with not damaging property. They have to do with not smoking within 10 feet of a building. So those are not any additional guidelines or restrictions that are being placed on users of this park that are not just general across city parks. And Dan, if you wanted to speak to that. But where we're asking people to sign kind of something coming in, anybody who wants to use the park is more than welcome to. The agreement, as we talked through it with the Parks Department, was to have individuals sign off on those rules simply to make sure they're aware of them so that there's a level of accountability. So that if somebody's coming into the park and they're trying to bring in open intoxicants or they're engaging in behavior that that is not appropriate for any of our city parks, but that there would be space for us to then have conversation about the expectations of utilizing St. John's Park and of engaging in this programming. And so in that sense, any user could come and use the park. It's not limited to, guests of St. John's or individuals experiences, but the expectation is they would be willing to sign off saying they would respect the rules that go along with Green Bay City Parks to be able to access the space. And if they refuse to sign that, then St. John's would, not be the park that they'd look to participate in programming at.
Okay, and I guess then for the police department, this question would be, is there going to be a blind eye turned towards the overnight occupation of the park and some of the conduct that took place in and around the park with the businesses that have been complaining quite a bit about the harassment and theft and unlawful entry into some of the buildings? Because obviously if some of these individuals don't want to follow the code of conduct, they're not going to be wanted at the park and they're going to be pushed elsewhere. And when that happens, they tend to go, they don't stray too far from the park or where they can go to St. John's at night. I'm just wondering if the police department is developing a different or better type of response to these situations.
Hi, everybody. Paul Van Handel with Green Bay Police Department. I'm a community police officer in the downtown area, and I also coordinate the homeless outreach team or HOT team for Green Bay and surrounding areas. So we exist. The homeless outreach team started in spring of 2019, just to bring everybody up to speed. And it exists through a memorandum of understanding or MOU between the Green Bay Police Department and the Brown County Homeless and Housing Coalition. And that coalition, some of those members are on tonight. Cheryl Dietrich is the president of the coalition, so she's with us tonight. And several organizations that are also part of the homeless outreach team. I'll just point them out real quick. Amanda Carbon with Outreach Healthcare. Hi, Amanda. And Stephanie with Options for Independent Living. That's getting a certified peer support program going, and we definitely want to offer certified peer support as one of those partners that Lexi's talking about in the park as well as case management from New Cap and people that can directly work with people that are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. So that is in essence what the homeless outreach team has been doing and trying to do, is locate people that are unsheltered homeless and look for engagement opportunities. So what this would do is give us a better resource and a better way to collectively combine our efforts to find a solution for people who are experiencing the unsheltered homelessness and start working on harm reduction types of strategies, which this would be one. To meet with them, engage with them, and start taking those first steps at getting someone to a different place. I know Lexi said this is not a homeless engagement type of opportunity, but we're going to bring people in that add trust and rapport, encourage, motivate, and mentor as much as possible. And then homeless outreach will be that bridge, if possible, between the street and the continuum of care, which is the Brown County Homeless and Housing Coalition. So along with that, no, we are not going to have nighttime camping in the park at St. John's Park. That is not part of what we are trying to do there. We are looking at another option to possibly solve that problem if it should arise. Like I know it did last year. There was camping going on in and around the park. We don't want that. We want to engage with people and find a different type of solution so that we provide safety. We do not believe that having people out on the street is a safe situation for anybody. So we're trying to get everybody to engage and find a safe place. I can't remember anything else as far as what the rest of your question was. No, we are not turning a blind eye to what goes on as far as laws that were, or ordinances that were not being followed. I know last year we had calls involving welfare checks, disturbances, suspicious activities, open intoxicants, and then there were ordinance violations that had taken place. we don't want to do that this year. We learned, or we should have learned from last year, how to go about this in a better, proactive way. And we think that that's what we're starting to do this year. So looking at it a little more comprehensively and being able to bring people out, engage with them, and hopefully be that bridge between what they're seeing on the street and a continuum of care to find answers to solve the problems they have in their life.
And if I could just add to that, Paul, I see Jack Melberg's on the call as well with New Community Shelter. And I'm not a quick scan. I'm not seeing other shelter providers specifically, but between New Community and St. John's, I would say it's not a capacity issue. I will say with COVID last year, there's certainly that was a different era, but with where we're at with COVID right now, where we're at with shelters is if individuals are willing to engage in programming. And for us as St. John's, that programming can include, if you're willing to engage with what we're offering at the park, which is pretty low barrier, high engagement. But then, whether it's our summer safe sleep program, whether it's New Community Shelter, whether it's one of the other, shelter or housing providers, there is overnight access to shelter in this community. And our goal is to get people into shelters. And then, as Paul mentioned, through that continuum of care, get them to more stable housing. And so I am, and speaking just as myself and on behalf of St. John's is I do not want to see this park become an overnight encampment. You look at Fresno, California, you see what happens the minute they designate an area to be a tent encampment is that needle sways and you can't pull it back. And so really this engaged proposal is to pull back the needle while we still have control and to say, let's engage people, let's meet them where they're at, let's get them connected to our services, let's get them into the continuum of care so that as a community, we keep people if they're in a shelter, they're transitioning into housing with support, so that we don't end up having an unsheltered homeless population in this community that becomes unmanageable in future years.
I appreciate those comments. And I really appreciate all the different nonprofit organizations that are helping out with this. I mean, the homeless situation is an ever-pressing need. I know that the police department every year ends up having to find individuals that people are concerned about that are sleeping in the underbrush of, you name it, location all over the city of Green Bay, and trying to get them into the services and the help that they need. I don't, this is kind of a delicate subject, but there are a group of people within the homeless population, and this is my belief, that, and I think this was really shown this last summer, that don't want to engage for whatever reason, mental health, substance abuse, any other combination of things that are going on in their lives. And I think they number a very, very small percentage of our homeless population, but they are the ones that draw the eye of the everyday citizen in our community. They're the ones that are causing problems on private businesses and parks such as St. John's and that. And I'm just wondering, and I know I'm not asking for an answer now, but long term, is this coalition looking for a more sustainable and effective long-term solution for these individuals so that they can be cared for, taken care of, and offered services until the day they decide they want to change their lifestyle, but that they're not a drain on our community and our resources, the hospitals, police, fire, and things like that.
And I will just think two things will come out of this park program this summer that will help with that. One is it quantifies how large is that population of individuals who are resistant or refuse to engage in local services, to separate what is a perceived capacity issue, what is simply a barrier to access resources versus individuals who just don't want to, who choose not to engage with programs. And so if law enforcement sees an individual who is unsheltered, who's somewhere in the downtown area, and they refer them to the park program, is that individual willing to engage with the programs being offered at the park, or is there simply a denial to even take that step? And so one is, I think it will help us quantify exactly what number are we talking about, to your point. But then the second thing I'll say is that's really where I would say the homeless outreach team, which I know is certainly well represented here tonight, that's where that group comes into play. And so that group we started as the Detox Coalition. We evolved into Basic Needs. It's become Homeless Outreach. And so it's addressed a lot of the complexities of homelessness and housing instability over the years. And I certainly don't want to speak for the committee and Officer Van Handel, chairing that. But I will say that committee is looking at the complexities around mental health and around co-occurring disorders with addiction and around people who are resistant to engage in services. And the homeless outreach team is able to go and meet with that individual and build that rapport, and hopefully kind of over that longer continuum of care at that individual level, be able to assess, be able to triage, and then hopefully over time be able to connect that individual into one of the local resources in our area. And so I think both having the park program to quantify it, having the homeless outreach team who is engaging with people who are still at this point choosing to perhaps not come into a shelter and not engage in a provider's services, that kind of that wraparound support is we'll really be able to holistically, hopefully start to address some of these problems.
Okay. And then I hate to take up all the time here, but I just want to get in and get going. I've got a birthday party I have to get to, and I'm going to get hung if I don't get involved real quick here. But my final question is, Green Bay does not have a Health and Human Services department. Our police officers, as in every department throughout the United States, have become quasi-social workers. St. John's is doing a heck of a job. There's so many people in nonprofit organizations with the Brown County area that care. I mean, it's obvious. You talked about the food, the clothing, a grill that was dropped off for these individuals last year. So many people want to help this situation and rectify it and help these individuals, become members of our society that are productive and get along with everyone. But and maybe I missed it, but out of all the organizations named here, I haven't heard the Brown County government named at all as one of the people that are involved with any of these initiatives. And I'm just wondering, have we reached out to them? Are they willing to help out with this, or is that something that bridge that has to be crossed yet?
We do have a street outreach representative from the Brown County Mental Health Treatment Center that is part of the homeless outreach team, and she does collaborate with us. So she's part of those meetings that we have monthly.
But is there any more tax dollars or anything going to be spent towards helping this situation other than having a member? I mean, facilities, programs, funding. I mean, right now it's Green Bay Parks, it's the Green Bay Police Department, it's the Green Bay Fire, it's the local hospitals, it's all these nonprofit organizations, all these private individuals. And I just thought, this is a Brown County situation. This isn't a Green Bay problem. I mean, Green Bay has the services in that, and so they tend to group down where they can get the help that they need. But is there any work being done towards that end?
Hi, Will Peters, City of Green Bay. If you don't mind, I would like to hop in just for a moment to answer part of that question. So Brown County has been at the table, both in the Homeless and Housing Coalition with Patrick Leifker and Eric Pritzel and a few others, and also in the task force, the staff team that has been created to help look at this issue. It's both interdepartmental, as was mentioned at the beginning. So it's made up of representatives from the parks departments, from my departments, community economic development, the mayor's office and PD, but also Brown County is part of that task force as well, with Eric Pritzel from Health and Human Services, and then Patrick Leifkar from the Brown County Housing Coalition. Homelessness is one of those tricky, multi-layered issues where a lot of folks, especially our folks who are like on the front lines, there are nonprofits who are out there doing outreach and engagement. A lot of this is you're trying to manage the crisis that we're in, the continuous crisis of homelessness, but then also trying to, when there's that spare energy and spare time to try to look up river and get a real handle on, okay, what is everyone doing in the community, both Brown County, Green Bay, but then also the nonprofit sector. What are we doing to help address this, and how can we be more effectively and efficiently be working together? So I will want to say, I know it's easy to say, well, where is Brown County? Where is, De Pere? Where is Ashwaubenon, Alloway at the table when it comes to this issue? Why is it all Green Bay? But I think what we're trying to understand right now and develop is a strategy and ways to more efficiently and effectively work together. And I don't want to put Cheryl Dietrich on the spot, but as the executive director of the Homeless and Housing Coalition, I know can speak to that as well, I'm sure.
And Cheryl does have her hand raised, and if you'd like to let her speak, she'd be more than willing to.
Yeah, and Sean too. So if Cheryl could just state your name and address.
Cheryl Dietrich, 1881 Short Street, Green Bay, Wisconsin, 54313. I am the president of the Brown County Homeless and Housing Coalition, which is a volunteer role. My paid job is I'm the president and CEO of NewCap. We're the federally designated community action agency in Brown County. Brown County is part of our territory. We are NewCap. We are one of a housing provider. We run a number of permanent housing programs. Since November of last year, we have been running an emergency shelter for families for shelter of last resort. That since we opened in the first part of November, we've had 10 families as guests of the shelter, with 18 at most count on our waiting list, which is what we have now. Unfortunately, that shelter is closing the same day that St. John's winter program closes. So we're looking for locations, for another location for those families right now. We've been working for probably a year, much more recently during last 6 months of COVID, trying to come up with a longer term solution. In the summertime, that's one of our major recognitions, is that in the summertime when St. John's goes down to the summer safe sleep program, that we lose a tremendous amount of capacity in the community. And last year during the month of October, which was the first month that we ran the motel voucher program for Brown County at NewCap, we spent $55,000 in motel vouchers during the month of October. We served 155 people. 123 were over the age of 18 and 32 were under the age of 18. And most of those were individuals, not families. And so even though there's a family shelter, there are 2 full-time family shelters, we still housed 18 families on motel vouchers during the month of October last year and before we could open our shelter. So there's something that happens, and I don't know if that's the transition between summer safe sleep and when St. John's opened November 1st, but we saw a dramatic rise in the number of unsheltered homelessness last year in this community. So we are actively as a coalition, and we've been working with a hot team, and I can't tell you how sad I am that Paul Van Handel is going to retire, although I don't know anybody who in coalition who signed off on that, Paul, so I don't think you get to go anywhere. But we've been working with a hot team and had staff trying to address the homeless issue last year in St. John's Park. I think we definitely have to do something, but yes, we need some longer term solutions. We have been engaging with Brown County, Alderman Galvin, to see how we can, what additional funds there might be, or where we can get Brown County at play in this. We've also taken your suggestion to heart, Alderman Galvin, about the potential of maybe a wet shelter, so a shelter addressing folks who are addicted to alcohol. So we're looking at a number of different things, but as a coalition, we're trying to address this, and as NewCap as an organization, we're looking to address this. We received $450,000 to open an unaccompanied youth shelter, and we're looking for a location for that currently. So we've got the coalition trying to come together and come up with answers, but the reality is we have, what are we at, 38 days before we get to May 1st. And so we need to address the folks that are going to be out this summer and try and get them where they are and try and get them to engage and come up with some answers. NewCap has never been in the shelter business before the last 6 months. We're in the get people into housing and try and keep them housed business, but we definitely want to engage with the shelter providers, and especially we struggle with the folks who, for lots of reasons, and Alderman Galvin, you mentioned two of those, are mental health issues and their addiction issues, why they end up not being able to be at either of our shelters that house individuals. So we're trying to come up with how can we assist with that. We've recently hired a mental health counselor to try and, who also has AODA training, to try and get out and engage with people as well. So yes, is this a bigger issue than just the city of Green Bay? Absolutely. Unfortunately, St. John's Park is in downtown Green Bay. And I completely agree with Lexi. In my previous life as the head of the Chamber of Commerce, if we don't as a community come up with an answer, we will quickly lose the business community and any assistance and patience we have. And then law enforcement ends up bearing the brunt of that because then they get the calls all of the time. So I appreciate St. John's putting this together. I know Lexi is an expert when it comes to dealing with long-term homelessness and with all the issues that roll into that. So as a coalition lead and as the organization lead for NewCap, we'll happy to stand by and assist in any way we can. But at the same time we're assisting, we are also looking for additional answers that might help alleviate this issue on a community-wide level.
And if I could just weigh in to clarify a couple things. So, because I know in the Engage proposal, it talks about our summer safe sleep. Again, I just want to reiterate, it's not a capacity issue. So that's the challenge. And to unpack that just a little bit is I know St. John's is not a year-round shelter in our robust 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. programming, but we provide access to shelter 12 months a year. And in the summer months, it just looks differently because it puts more of the burden on our daytime resource centers and now on this park proposal to really kind of keep that at the center. And then it provides the access to safe overnight housing, from April 30th through November 1st. The contingency being that individuals who are in our summer safe sleep program need to be willing to meet with a case manager, because our belief is if the best we can offer them is a mat on the floor in a shelter of last resort in the middle of summer in a building that doesn't have air conditioning, if that's our access to shelter, then we're doing them a disservice if we're not trying to help that individual move forward to something more stable. And so the tension we feel as an organization, because we know we are known as the seasonal shelter that closes April 30th, we know our programs continue. And for anybody who's willing to work towards their goals, that 35-40 number is never a hard number. The city knows, we've had those meetings with the city, is if we have 60 people, if we have 80 people willing to meet with the case manager in the summer but needing access to summer safe sleep, we will serve absolutely every single one of those. We've never been a shelter that sought to turn people away due to capacity. We are that low barrier shelter. We're not a zero tolerance shelter. We do take people under the influence of drugs or alcohol as long as they're able to provide self-care. It's simply that willingness to meet with the case manager about what's your next step and what's your long-term plan. And I believe I outlined it in this proposal. I could go back and review, but what we've seen with summer safe sleep, so kind of the unintentional consequences of us stepping in to meet this unmet need in the summer months is it started to surge. The summer prior to COVID, so the summer of 2019, we served more people, more different human being individuals walk through our doors in the summer safe sleep program than utilized our services the entire winter, the season prior. And so when you're talking, we're serving 445 individuals when we're known for that winter emergency shelter, and we're serving well over 500 individuals in the summer safe sleep program, which is simply the mat on the floor. We came back into shelter season, we started looking at it, and what we realized is you could go up to an individual in December and say, hey, what's your plan? We're a seasonal shelter, we close April 30th. What's your plan come April 30th? And already in December, January, February, they're telling you their summer plan is summer safe sleep. And so we're doing a disservice if we're simply sitting there saying, okay, and now we've become this year-round shelter that individuals don't need to move forward. We are absolutely there with that robust programming in the winter. We want to ensure that everybody has access to safe housing, that nobody's exposed to the elements in the winter as well as exposed to the elements in the summer. But part of us seeing the inherent worth of the individuals in the population we serve is ensuring that we are also helping them get to that next step, whether that's permanent supportive housing with NewCap, whether that's that subsidized housing through ICS or whatever that case may be. And so I just want to be clear, because I hear a lot of people question, why doesn't St. John's go year round? Essentially, we are. But we don't want this mentality that we are just this long-term option 12 months a year for an individual in our community. And so that's the tension. And, and again, I see that there's another shelter on the call that, could weigh in. I would assume they'd echo the same sentiment. Is just we have the space, we want to serve people, we want to get them in, but they need to be willing to simply meet with the case manager to talk about what does it look like for you to be forward moving and accomplish your goals. So.
All right, thank you, and I appreciate that. And just a few comments here. And I think we are moving forward in the right way. We have, I think, the right people, the right organizations. And I just think it's hard to work towards a more permanent solution when you have things like you described last summer, the summer before, then you throw COVID into the mix. It really exacerbated the whole problem to do much more than just immediate needs. But I think you're correct. There is a certain very small segment of this population that doesn't want to move forward for whatever reason. And I think there needs to be a work towards a solution for that problem. I think working for the people that do want to move forward, I think there's a lot of things in place, and we're doing as much as we can right now. I have heard that there are some private dollars that could be available for some possible solutions for the individuals that don't want to move forward. If it's what these people with the money feel it's the right way to move forward. So it's a government issue. It's society's issue, which they all pay taxes. But if we're looking for the dollars to jumpstart some of these, we have to have good plans that would be acceptable for these people that have those kind of funds that they can give to us. So, but I really commend everyone that's been working towards these solutions, coming up with different programs and finding the monies and the volunteers to make this a better community for everybody. And with that, I am going to have to bow out. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Elder Galvin. I see your milk mustache is growing. Do you need a straw? Does Sean wish to speak now? If so, please state your name and address.
Hi there, Sean Smith, 340 South Monroe Avenue, Green Bay. So I wanted to come on the meeting tonight as somebody who runs one of our local downtown businesses. I'm the general manager of Newcomer Funeral Home, which is located about a block from the park and the shelter. The homeless population in Green Bay, I moved here 5 years ago from the New Haven, Connecticut area. And besides running funeral homes within the course of my career, I was also in ministry out in New Haven for nearly a decade before coming here. I have some serious concerns about the homeless population in our city. There seems to be a migration that's happening, and I've really had a front row seat to it. First thing I'd like to say is, thank you to Ms. Wood and to our shelter leaders. The good work that they're doing is extremely needed and noble work. But I am, again, very concerned as someone who's close to the shelter that some of the lack of rules at the shelter is causing a migration of homelessness here. I think that the park proposal is somewhat of a Band-Aid, because I know that within the homeless population, as far as mental illness goes and some social anxiety disorders, you're always going to have a certain demographic of that population that's just going to be unwilling to be helped. And if we consider the particular area, I guess I have a career in that I've watched that park over the past year 24 hours a day, because my business is one that we get up in the middle of the night. We have personally experienced in the downtown area last year a horrible problem with homeless defecation on our property, vandalization. We have most recently had a violent individual unlawfully entering the building, threatening our staff here, urinating in our bathrooms, of which we had to call the police. And I just wonder, these individuals, even with the programs, are just going to migrate to another park. They're not going to engage in the programs. And as noble as it is to take care of the needy in that, I'm perplexed by the homeless population that we have in Green Bay. That doesn't seem to be getting smaller. It seems to be getting larger. And I think that there are some good questions with that. I also consider, the elementary school right across the street from it, the sleeping in the park. I mean, my laundry list here of the issues that I've had over the past half decade hasn't gotten shorter. It's growing. And so I come on here tonight not to, ostracize what's happening or to say that we shouldn't be trying to find a solution. But I have serious concerns as to why this is the way it is. I've engaged with a lot of our homeless population that have been in our parking lots, coming in wanting to use bathrooms. We have some very respectful individuals, but I will be honest, there's been times that my staff and even myself have feared for our safety. And we're a block away, and our business has been working hard to transform our downtown. There's a lot of really great stuff that's happening in this particular neighborhood, but we continue to have these problems. And most recently, I received a call asking, no longer to have so much law enforcement coming in, but calling a number where if I dial the extension, I'm put into voicemail at the police department and told to give a description and where the last person was seen. This particular individual came in and threatened two of our, staff members that they were going to need coffins and funerals if they didn't step back in our own building. And so that's where I think that this is a difficult issue. You are going to have these individuals where if this parks program is instituted, they're simply going to move to another park. And we're just going to have trouble in another area. I think the deep question is what's bringing them here in the first place? I think some of our population rightly comes from the Green Bay area, but I would be interested to know if there's ever been a census performed that's telling us how many of these people have actually originated in Green Bay and its surrounding areas versus how many people are coming here from the outside. I spoke with two people on our property last year who had come from the Milwaukee area on a bus because they were called by friends who had said that things were looser up here. They were easier to deal with. And I'm all one for helping. I served meals at a shelter in New Haven for almost 10 years, 3 days a week. Our chair preparing and serving meals. And so that particular issue is close to my heart. Moving here to Green Bay, and as someone who originates from the Midwest, from Upper Michigan, I'm puzzled by the size of our homeless population in this city. I don't know. I wonder if we are, to a certain degree, enabling, and maybe not helping in some of the ways that we could. And I would be interested in hearing what we think is really going to happen as far as, we have, these sound like wonderful programs for the park. My concern is I have another park right next to my place of business, which is literally across the parking lot from Grace Lutheran Church. That park has already begun the process of harboring a lot of our homeless community in RVs, out on the benches. We've had panhandling at funerals. So I guess that would be my question is, aren't they just going to move?
That's a possibility, but I want to, if I can, just address the migration data that Sean asked about. if I can't do that, Balance of State talked to us, talked to the coalition back on February 8th of this year. So statewide inflow to Brown County from other areas in the state were 119, but outflow from Brown County to the rest of the state was 143. So we actually sent out, or more that are homeless actually left Brown County than came in as of last year. That's from between October 1st, 2019 and September 30th of 2020. So just to answer that part of it, will people move to another park? Yes, that's certainly possible. And I think that is a mission for the homeless outreach team and individuals that work in homeless outreach, is to engage them in those other locations. No, it is not all right for them to not go to St. John's Park and then have ordinance violations in any other park either. So we're not going to tolerate that. So just to clear the air on that.
Yeah.
So-
and oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to add to Paul's comment, Sean, and say, I know that question comes up frequently. And so that's not a data point. And I know another alderman had asked it prior to tonight's meeting as well. So it's not something that we always have real-time data on, but I do know, I've been with St. John's for 9 years. Every single time I've heard the Balance of State or HMIS, which is our management information system, pull that data, every single year I have heard that more people have left Green Bay for other communities than have come in. And so I think that's just a data point that really needs to be heard, I guess, and understood by our group, because there certainly is that sense of, it seems like they're coming from other communities, and yet just kind of the natural flow in and out of somebody experiencing homelessness is consistently, it's not that we are the end goal for these large populations of individuals.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly, point of order.
I think we need to get a hold of this meeting. We've opened the floor for people to make comments about this program. And the committee is trying to decide whether to recommend that the council approve this program. Personally, I would like to just say that I have rarely seen a program that has been launched so quickly with so much thought and such powerful partners. And we're not here to solve the problem of homelessness. We're here to deal with this particular program, and I would like us to stay on this subject, please. Sorry, I'm such a, I used to be a teacher.
No, but I think the point of, does the program attract people, a valid point to take up? Because
I think that's
from others that, we want to, that we have the programming so people come here. And so I think that's a good point to discuss. Did you have something else, Sean?
Yeah, that is part of my concern, is that as we continue these programs, and some of the rules are more lax than shelters that I've seen before, are we enticing with this program using city dollars that are still going to maintain it, and we're just going to migrate it to another park, which is going to be perpetuating and keeping the same problems. As someone that runs a business close to it, I'm very mindful of the issue and the sensitivity of the subject, but I just worry that Green Bay is going down a path, and that this is part of that is just going to make it more appealing for individuals to continue migrating here. Not that we want an exodus, or we don't have a human responsibility to the dignity of their person, but they're also, it's going to go back to, is this just another way that we are enabling this to happen?
If Stephanie would like to speak, please state your name and address.
Hi, good evening. I'm Stephanie Birmingham. I'm actually no longer a resident of Brown County due to COVID. I've relocated to Door County. I'm actually going to speak to you as a former resident of Green Bay. My former address was 1900 Morrow Street in Green Bay, 54302. I come here wearing many hats and multiple identities, but I'd like to speak to you tonight from my identity that I'm quite proud of, And for those of you who've interacted with me and know me, you know that I live this identity strongly. I'm an individual with a disability. The individuals that we're talking about tonight are, in fact, a significant number of them are people with disabilities. So I just want to provide some insight and wisdom from the disability model and lens. When we talk about these individuals, I ask that we remember a trauma-informed lens, that these are individuals who are coming with stories that we don't always know all about, and they experience multiple barriers that have brought them to where they are at this point. And those barriers include ableism, racism, discrimination, sexism, and various phobias and stereotypes about who they are and who they should be. So I just ask that we be mindful and check ourselves with regards to how we understand homelessness and how we feel the best and most appropriate response is to meeting them on where they're at. Thank you.
I would just like to address the issue of the programming, attracting people. And I've been involved with homelessness since I've been in Alder, 7 years here. And it's been my experience that programming is actually always a plus. Any kind of programming, any kind of services we can provide has always been a plus and made the problems better, not worse. It's true that Green Bay is the biggest community in the urban center, and so we do end up attracting people. I mean, if you go to the Pier website, if you're homeless, they say go to Appleton or go to Green Bay. They're the places that have the services. They don't have any. To me, that's again something that maybe the county needs to get involved in with. That's a whole other side of things. For us, my experience has been the more programming we have, the more services we have, the more we get a grip on this problem and the better off we are. And so it's been that way for 7 years, and I don't expect that to really change. I don't see anything that would change that. So I'm glad to see this program. I mean, we do have a problem. We had a problem without a program. If we didn't have a program, there would be people, again, at St. John's and other parks, and they wouldn't be getting any services. And I think that just makes it much more difficult, makes the problem much more harder on our businesses and our community. So I think the more programs we can engage them with, the better off we are. So that's my 2 cents on that. Is there anyone who cares to speak on this, or Paul Demuth?
Yeah, I'm Father Paul Demuth. I'm the only one that lives on top of the park. So I live right across the street from the shelter.
Please, name and address, please, for the.
Okay, Father Paul Demuth, 413 St. John Street, Green Bay 54301. I'm a retired priest. I live in the apartment on the 2nd floor of the rectory. So I've seen a lot, and the shelter is right out my back window. And first thing I got to say is, number one, I am amazed overall how respectful most of the clients at the shelter are, the women and the men. There's always, now and then you'll get someone who is really troubled, but the majority of the people I see are treated with respect and speak that way. It was an encampment in many ways last summer. I mean, sometimes you saw that the shelter stacked with clothes and whatever else. So it has to change. And I think the programming that you are proposing is a very, very good step in the right direction. Notice I didn't say a solution, but a step in the right direction. We as a community, as a county, have got to get at the much bigger question that Sean's bringing up and many of the rest of you have brought up, that Alderman Galvin has brought up. And I think there are some steps that are being taken. There is a quiet study that at this point is having hearings that's backed by the Brown County Greater Green Bay Community Foundation with city and county and the coalition and a number of other groups sponsoring it. And one of the things are based on a Rochester, Minnesota model, which is very similar to our geographic area. I've done a lot of reading in terms of what's going on in other communities, big communities, smaller communities. The one common denominator answer is no one program answers the question. And no, one size does not fit all. We're all so complex as human beings with disabilities, with issues. And so it has to be a very much combined effort. And the bigger questions have to be continued to be answered and addressed on a much more global situation. And I will keep advocating for that day in and day out until that is able to be addressed. But in the meantime, hooray, I'm going to be very glad to have people across the street from 7 to 7 or whatever the hours are that will be working with these folks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who care to speak, or does any of the committee have any questions?
So I just want to reiterate, would the park be closed at night and we wouldn't see the individuals sleeping there?
No.
No, so it would still remain open, is that correct?
It is closed in the sense that the park hours, Dan, can you clarify? The park closes at 10:30?
Correct. The park closes at 10 o'clock to the public. So at that point, there would not be any individuals left in the park. They would not be allowed to sleep there as they did last year. So that's the intention with this program, is by having staff there, we can provide other resources and other opportunities to the people who come to the park to give them options to find arrangements for the evening.
And
I think it sounds like a great program, Ms. Wood. It's certainly going to occupy them during the day, which, I'm in my office, during the day. And I think that that's a very important thing, because a lot of times, many of them like to be engaged, as they're coming through. I've had some great conversations, and we built some, strong relationships over here at the funeral home as well. My biggest concern is just the policing aspect, that there is going to be, and I think you've acknowledged, there will be a population that just aren't going to accept those resources, and that we are going to be diligent as a community in making sure that our laws are followed and that we're providing a safe environment downtown. That's important to me, not just as someone who runs a business here. It's important for me for the grade school that's a block away, that we're just making sure that, our community is being safe. There's certainly no doubt about the goodness of the program. It sounds like a wonderful idea. I just think when you have the people that aren't listening and they are deeply troubled, and some that can be violent, to be quite honest, that we can reach out to our police and call them directly, so that they can come and they can assist us in those particular situations.
So I can answer just a couple of those questions specific to the park program and our relationship with law enforcement. Is one, I know James Anderson with the Parks Department met with the principal of Howe Elementary School about this proposal. Howe is very supportive. I think for them, having staff and having that level of engagement is something that's welcomed and appreciated by the staff of the school. Another thing is, though the park closes, at 10 p.m. or whatever time that was, year round, we have in place that our staff during our hours of operation include perimeter checks. Those perimeter checks always include the park, and then they include any of our immediate neighbors who have requests. So, we have a law firm that at times asks us to check to make sure the door is locked or that somebody's not sleeping under the canopy, or so any of the local neighbors can make requests of what we include in that perimeter check. And so we do have a presence throughout the overnight hours, that with this understanding that this park, because access to all of these different services and coming into shelter, the expectation that people are not sleeping in the park. And I think that's really what we're trying to prevent, is again, tipping that needle into a space where the downtown Green Bay community starts to exist with tent encampments and with this strong presence of this unsheltered homeless population. And so, so we look to, certainly have the services during the day, but then provide that presence overnight as well. In terms of if there's a situation, and I can speak specifically to the park, and Paul can weigh in with neighboring businesses, but this partnership has very much been a collaboration between the city of Green Bay Police Department, St. John's. And so the understanding for the police department that they would have a presence, just a proactive, positive presence within our programs, that they'd be there, they'd know who's participating in Engage. But then also for this understanding of if there's somebody that we just believe is beyond our ability to care for, or they're a concern for, downtown residents or businesses, that we certainly have that relationship with police department and with the mental health officers, that we can get them on site to, certainly assess that situation as well. And so, so I would say it's been a very collaborative partnership between St. John's and the police department for, certainly as many years as I've been on staff.
And I would like to also add that the police department has been very helpful with working with us over the last number of years at St. John's and at all of our parks. And, I'm going to speak for Paul here in saying that they're going to continue to do what they need to do to make this a better community as it relates to dealing with those problems in the community. So they're very willing to work with us, and I'm sure that commitment is there to continue that.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. I mean, we don't want it to become an attractive nuisance at any park, and so we're whenever we locate homeless encampment, yes, the property is tagged. We work with that individual on placement options and really ultimately work to find solutions. So, and that means collaborating with business leaders in the area too. So we do that throughout the year. And yes, they voice their concerns, and we do the best we can to mitigate any situation so that it doesn't get out of control. So.
Any questions from anyone from the committee? Alder Burnett.
Yeah, Lexi, I have a question. Over the summer months, we saw some encampments under the overpass. Mm-hmm. If you and your organization focus efforts on the park, is there any fear that the population will just shift to another part of the city, namely the overpass?
I would say I've been very vocal since the beginning of this proposal that this is the solution to end the summertime need. I do believe that bringing this presence into the park will disrupt the size of the group that was congregating and some of those concerning behaviors that resulted from just that large population of individuals. I believe we'll be able to break up the size of that group and engage a lot of those individuals in programming. I'd be remiss not to mention that I absolutely believe there's those that simply don't want the supervision. They want the independence. They want the freedom. Individuals, there are going to be some who choose, they want to find a location where they can drink during the day. For those individuals, it will present in a different park or perhaps under the Mason Street Bridge. And in those cases, I feel like as a nonprofit provider, my stance is we need to do all we can as providers to offer engagement to our services, to offer access, to remove barriers, to welcome people into that continuum of care. At the same time, and do it with a lens that is very respectful and aware of the mental health and the addiction that some of our individuals experiencing homelessness are currently facing. At the same time, these are grown adults. We're talking about adults 18 and above, and there comes a point where we as a community can offer the resources. And if somebody is going to choose to not engage, and then as a result, there's natural consequences at some point for the behaviors that they will continue to choose to engage with. And at that point, I'd look to Paul and I'd look to law enforcement, to kind of speak to that. But if law enforcement is finding somebody who's engaging in something that's not supported, a legal activity or whatever it may be, and they're not willing to come, but there's at least a resource for them, then I think law enforcement at least doesn't feel like they're stuck. Like right now, I think they find an individual and they don't know what the resource or the referral could be. And now you have an option. And if that individual chooses to not engage with that option, then whatever the alternative is, at least they're not landing in this pot because we as a community didn't try to offer them, something that was better and forward moving. So yes, I think there will be some people that spread out. And I think that the goal is just through the homeless outreach team to try to continue to engage people, to get them to come, whether it's our park program or to one of the other resources or services in the community. But knowing we've made that good faith effort to open access and open the doors to all of our programs, then I think, it just leaves a position where if there's accountability still for them behaviors, it's done so knowing, we as a community have offered alternatives.
The Mica Center is fully operational and will be this summer. Is that correct?
That is correct. Mica Center is fully operational throughout the summer. Wellspring is fully operational throughout the summer. The shelter will continue to have our drop-in Tuesdays, and now we will also be full-time at the park. So we as St. John's will have 3 full-time programs for which people can engage during the day throughout the summer months.
Does the shelter St. John's or volunteers shuttle the unsheltered from the park to the Mica Center or your other facilities?
We have a 15 passenger van. We typically only use that in bad weather, wind chill kind of situations. I would say if there was something, if there was lightning and we weren't going to be running in the park or something like that, then our van is certainly an option to get to those other locations. However, Mica Center, the shelter, and the park are certainly all within a few block radius.
So an obvious goal for this program would be to assist the unsheltered, to provide assistance as a community through your agency and other agencies. But Lexi, would you say an end goal of this program would be that people who, let's just say, are not unsheltered, the general public, children, families, other members of the community who aren't suffering with homelessness, that they would be able at some point to use the park again and feel safe and welcome in that environment? Would that be an end goal of this program?
I would say absolutely. I think the goal of the program is to ensure that the neighborhood, St. John Shelter has a vested interest in this park because this park is part of our neighborhood. And we want to be a good neighbor. I look to Father Paul, who's our next door neighbor. We want to make sure we're serving the residents and the businesses that directly surround us. And, I would include Sean in on that as well as a neighbor just a block over. And so we want to make sure we're doing our part through innovation and through programming and through thinking outside of the box to ensure that St. John's Park and that entire community is just a great place to call home or to call your space for your employment. And so our goal through this program is to engage individuals to address through our presence and our just accountability within the park to decrease some of the negative behaviors that we've seen and observed. Sean spoke earlier to the defecation downtown. In large part, that happened because there were so many issues in St. John's Park last summer that the Parks Department had to shut down the bathroom. And I certainly understand that the bathroom had to be locked because there were concerning behaviors going on within the bathrooms within the park. By us having a presence there, the bathrooms can be open. We can maintain the bathrooms. We can support businesses in that way. So our goal is to make sure that downtown continues to be a great area for those businesses and those residents.
Okay, thank you. Chairman, I have no other questions for the public, but when we close the floor, I have some questions for.
I do want to also add that, what we're proposing here is a 1-year trial on this program. And then we'll reevaluate it at the end of the season and determine whether or not we go ahead with it again next year. And so our hope is that this is not a long-term commitment in the park. We want this to be a friendly neighborhood park again like it used to be. And we're hoping that this program will help get us in the right direction to lead us that way.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this? Any other questions?
Motion to close the floor.
Motion to close the floor by Alder Burnett.
Second.
Seconded by Alder Gerlach. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The floor is now closed. Alder Burnett.
Director Ditch, when I looked at the program, the thing that jumped out to me was the constitutional concerns. Did the law department review the plan, it's a public space. Obviously, we have to do something because right now the public space is a danger to many members of the public as it currently exists. Did the law department review it from a constitutional standpoint?
I don't know if they reviewed it from a constitutional standpoint, but they did review the program in general. I guess I'd have to find out a little bit more about the specifics of what your concerns are so that we could reach out to the law department before the city council meeting next week. But they reviewed the proposal. They're looking at this as a similar agreement with other user groups in the parks, where we would just require them to sign a hold harmless agreement with the city to allow them to operate this program within the parks. But other than that,
I said constitutional, and for lack of a better term, maybe it would be a discriminatory standpoint, that if a member of the public wanted to use the park and one set of users had to abide by a set of rules and another set of users who were not unsheltered or homeless having not to abide by those rules, could it set the city up for some claims of discrimination? I'm not saying that's the case. It would just be nice to know that the law department signed off on it. But what you're saying is that they reviewed it and that they have no concerns on the specific things you mentioned.
correct. So I think Lexi, when she spoke before, she discussed that we were looking at having people who want to be in the program sign a form, basically committing to following the rules within the parks. And so we would, ask that anybody who comes to the park who wants to use that park would also sign that agreement. All that it says is that, they're going to follow the ordinances and the rules of the parks. There's nothing out of the ordinary where one person would have to agree to it and another would not.
I'm no attorney, but let's just say the word equal protection. We don't require this in other city parks. We require. I'm not saying that that's going to be the case. I'm just saying, in a very litigious society, I could see how some could view it in a discriminatory fashion. That's all. And
Okay.
And under the lens of trauma-informed care, as the speaker mentioned earlier, we have to consider those things as well. So I'm not trying to be overly critical. It's just the way my thought process is playing out.
Yeah, that's fine. I'd be happy to reach out to the law department and get a response for you prior to council.
That's fine. Thank you.
So I'm glad we got that clarification then. So anybody coming to the park would need to sign this code?
That's how it's set up right now, but, we can look at amending that, or we'll work with the law department over the next week on what the appropriate stance would be.
Yeah, because if a couple of kids came to the park to throw the ball around or whatever, I'm not sure we would need to extend that contract to them. I mean, they're obviously not there for any kind of services or for anything. I don't know. Well, talk it over with legal and see.
And I will tell you that just based on the history of the park, it's very few and far between the number of residents that come to that park. So, we don't have a large percentage of local residents going to that park. They visit other ones instead. But there are occasional residents who do use it. There are children that do come and use that playground. So we will definitely get an answer to that concern.
Anything from anyone? Alder Gerlach?
Are you ready to entertain a motion?
I'm always ready to entertain a motion.
Well, I'd like to entertain you. I move that we approve this pilot program move forward to start on April 30th.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second that, but I want to comment on it.
Certainly. Yep. A second by Alder Brunette. And did you want to comment now, or do you want Alder Weary to go?
Alder Weary has been very patient, which isn't usually a strong suit, so I'll let him speak.
Well, I promise I'll call him out of order.
That's good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'm probably the only one on this committee, except for Mr. Officer Van Handel. I'm sure he was around back then. When I first got on the council, St. John's was a sore point in that it offered a good service, but it didn't really serve the needs of the homeless other than giving them someplace to sleep. And so that caused a lot of friction in the neighborhood with community, the surrounding area. So the city said, well, you're going to need a permit. You're going to have to follow all the different codes for them to stay there, and you're going to have to offer services. And so that was a big fight for a while, but it's really progressed to something good, and they do a really good job there now on what they offer. One thing that I do miss is that we used to get a yearly report on who used the service over the course of the year, male, female, age, and where they're from. That was a big one for me. What percentage of people weren't from Green Bay, weren't from Brown County. And it kind of gave us a gauge of what was going on. I don't know when that disappeared, but that would be awesome to have back again. I know Mr. Smith had mentioned that. Ms. Wood, I appreciate you taking a lot of time to reply to my email. I had a lot of questions for you, and you really had some good detailed answers. I can tell you've thought this out, and you're really passionate about it, because it's not an easy issue. I mean, if it was, it would be solved. All I know is if something like this were, say, at Marquette Park here in my neighborhood, nobody'd want it. There'd be no kids going to that park. Nobody would want to send their kids to a park where the homeless were going to be hanging out. Sorry, it's just not going to happen. So as long as this is happening in that park, it's really, I don't think, going to be much of a community park. I really don't. So I'm approaching this hopefully, and it might be something worth trying, but I'm also very skeptical. I've seen the services grow in the city, and now we have 2 day centers, and this would be kind of a third one. Then we're going to have a fourth one and a fifth one. I don't know. It almost seems like we should steer them to what we have. And if they don't want to use it, then the tough love comes. Ms. Wood, you've stated that. You're all in favor of that, too. We have services for free to use. If you're not going to use it, I think you said there's natural consequences to people's behavior, whether, public urination or drug use or loitering, vandalism, things like that. So I'm still kind of, as you can tell, not quite sure how I want to vote on this yet. Sometimes the path to a good place, the path to where you want to go, it can be a bad place, but you're paving it with good intention. And I know everybody has good intentions, but the last thing I want to do, and I know some of us were ridiculed on the council years ago for saying we don't want to be an attraction. And that's true. And I'll publicly say that. We'll help anybody who's here who needs help. Cannot and will not be an attraction for people to come here for what we have, because that will just domino out and overwhelm us, especially when our surrounding partners don't seem interested in helping us. I wish Schwab and Howard and Bellevue would say, hey, you know what, we're going to pitch in and help. Former Mayor Schmidt had reached out numerous times and got no help at all. They really weren't interested in helping. So I'll be interested in hearing a few more comments. That's all I have for now. I'm still up in the air, I guess. Sometimes things are worth a try, but I don't want this to become we're trying it and it just becomes a yearly thing. And then we might as well just sign the park over to St. John's and it'll be a park, but it's owned by them. It's no longer a city park. So that's all I have right now. Thanks.
Alder Burnett.
There's a problem, obviously, and we need to have it addressed. And I don't know what the alternative is. The thing that I really struggle with is, as Alder Weary said, basically turning, and again, for lack of a better way of explaining it, we're basically turning over a city park to be monitored by another institution, not necessarily the city, but a shelter. But again, something needs to be done, because another year, the issue is not going to magically disappear. And I don't think having the police department go and bust up any encampments or physically, forcefully drive people out would be the most humanitarian thing to do. So on this, you go with the track record. I have a lot of faith in St. John's and Lexi's leadership. All the other nonprofit providers have a lot of faith and belief in the police department and what they do. And excuse the pun, but I have a lot of faith in the faith community as well. So if we address this from a community standpoint and realize it's a 1-year pilot, prefer to maybe have a 2 or 3 month check-in, because if it's not working, then we should be able to reserve the right to pull the plug on it at that time rather than wait an entire year or season. But the other thing, the main thing that I struggle with is the constitutional balance. We have to be equal across all city parks. If we have this issue at this particular park, and those who are going there who are unsheltered, if they then just navigate over to another park, then we'll have an issue over there. And if we're going to have the requirement that some users of one park have to, or the users of one park have to sign an agreement, do the people of the other park have to sign this agreement? You see, it kind of puts us down a really slippery slope that we have no idea where that will take us. So Director Ditchite, I'll support the motion tonight. That doesn't mean I'm going to support it when it gets to council, because I really want to hear from the law department. We have to look at this from every perspective. We think we're doing a good thing, but if it, adds some sort of litigation or some sort of discriminatory practice by the city, I think we need to really consider that. But again, it's a leap of faith. We have to do something. We can't have another year go on like last year. But I'm going on the track record. So I'll support the motion as presented tonight. And then hopefully we get a little more information from the law department prior to the council meeting in a week.
Alder Verla?
We have 67 parks in Green Bay. And this is one of the very smallest parks. And Director Ditchite has said that it doesn't seem to be used by a lot of children to come and swing and throw the ball around and that sort of thing. And we have a problem. Homelessness is always a problem. I lived in that had a huge homeless problem and a huge homeless plan to take care of the problem. And homeless were just part of the neighbors where I lived. Now I'm back in Green Bay, and I want to do something to help solve the problem of the homeless in Green Bay, because no one should be homeless. And so we have this little park. We have 66 other parks. If you look at this proposal, it has some long-range possibilities that envision, if this project works and it gets traction and it does well for the homeless, people have already looked down the road to say, you know what, here are some things we could do for this park. For example, someone has mentioned in this proposal that eventually perhaps the playground equipment will be moved out to a different park. And this will become devoted to adults. And this will become devoted to the homeless. I see absolutely no problem with that if it is a successful way to address this issue. So let's try it. Let's try it with a positive attitude. Let's give them the whole time they're asking for to demonstrate that it might work and to figure out how to make it better. And if in the end, St. John's Park becomes a park for just grown-ups who don't have a home, I'm very pleased to do that.
I would just like to ask, this is not, we're not inventing the wheel here. This is done elsewhere, correct? There are other communities that have programs like this in a park. Am I mistaken on that?
We might have to open the floor back up to Lexi on that, but I'm not aware of any programs that are exactly like this nationwide. This is kind of a trial program. There are other communities that offer programs out there, but not quite with the same setup that we're looking at, where it's entirely run out of the park as part of an adult program, similar to our Youth Parky program. So I think there is some sort of a trial aspect to this, but I guess, Lexi, if you feel differently, raise your hand and we can open the floor different again. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Then I was a little mistaken on that. I came in late to the hot meeting, so okay. Well, for me, I think, any programming is better than no programming, and we're going to have problems no matter what. So what's the best way to handle programs? Well, handle problems is to have a proactive plan for them. I do think that, as Alder Burnett mentioned, perhaps there maybe need to be some things worked out procedurally, how we're going to do this. I wasn't thinking that we would be asking everyone at the park to sign this code of conduct or ethics code or whatever it is. Perhaps that might be something. I mean, what happens if someone refuses? They don't get kicked out of the park, do they? I mean, to me, the code was just a way to inform and engage some of the homeless people to get them thinking about the rules and aware of the rules, and to one step to get them engaged. But if someone refuses to not sign the code, I don't think, can we kick them out of the park? Is that what we're looking at to do?
We'll review that with the law department, like I said,
Okay.
and get you an answer to that.
All right. Okay.
Chairman,
Well, Alder Gerlach and then Alder Weir.
Just really quick, two things. One, I do believe that I heard Director Ditchite say that the code of conduct is simply the rules that apply to all parks. It's not a special code of conduct. He's nodding his head, so I'm right on that. And the second thing is, I just want to make sure that we're clear. This would not be turning the park over to a third party. The Green Bay Police Department is part of the city, and the Parks Department is part of the city, and they are full partners in this. So this is not just, turning this park over to a third party.
Yeah, Alder Weir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I would definitely like this or not, because if you can't, maybe we
Alder Weir, we are losing.
list the 10 different things. When everybody who went there sees it. I don't know. That way it holds it. See, what happens, Lieutenant? Is it Lieutenant Officer Van Handel, or are you like a captain, commander now?
Sorry, just community police officer, tried and true. I didn't catch your actual question, though. The audio
Okay.
broke up.
No, thank. I called you lieutenant at first, but I wasn't sure you might be commander already.
No.
Just before he retires, Commander. I think
That's
that's
not pretty good here.
Right. I didn't catch your question. I'm sorry, the audio was broke up, so I don't know if there was a direct question there or not.
Oh, yeah, there is. Let's say percentage, whatever it would be, don't want to sign anything, don't want to agree to anything. And so they do migrate over to Jackson Square and start camping out, hanging out, maybe doing some of the things that are illegal. How would you approach it then over there?
Again, it's hypotheticals. It's on a case by case basis, and of course, we're not going to turn a blind eye to any type of ordinance violations that are made. I mean, I'll just tell you that out of the 100 days or whatever we had of last summer, I spent, I think, 150 of them in the parks, namely St. John's Park and then Flatley Park and even Light Park. I mean, so we encountered a growing group of individuals. We worked with those people in homeless outreach, and any time that we have people, and I realize there are people that may not want to engage right away in services, and what we do is continue to re-engage. That we don't give up on anybody. I talk to individuals with both significant mental health as well as AODA issues, and as Lexi mentioned, the co-occurring needs that take place. And yes, some of those are people that really, really need treatment. However, in their situation that they have, they don't know what's wrong with them. And it's up to us, it has been up to us to offer those resources and engage them in such a way that they understand what the best thing is for them to do. And that takes time, it takes energy, it takes, like I said, that trust and rapport building. And certainly when it comes to any type of law violations, we try and first encourage, motivate, and mentor in any situation. And these situations are all unique and difficult and challenging. we're patient. We do whatever we can to help that individual realize what their needs are and then accept those needs on the basis that we offer. So, yes, it's not about allowing ordinance violations to take place or not. It's about doing what's the best possible thing is for each and every individual that finds themselves in an unsheltered, homeless situation. That's what we did last year. And even when I retire, that's what we're going to continue to do. So, no, even in any park, and again, we did follow those folks in groups under the bridge at times. I realized on Mason Street, certainly worked with them there. We work with them wherever they are. It doesn't really matter if it's a park or not. We don't allow ordinance violations or laws to be broken anywhere. Certainly, we had a larger population throughout the summer. It grew. Some of that was possibly COVID related, because other resources weren't as active, but we're going to continue to engage this situation any way we can. So I guess that's most I can say on it.
And I appreciate it. Everybody wants empathy here and to offer the resources, and we have a really great group of people and organizations now that do that. But at some point, we do need to also put our foot down and say, this is what we have to offer, and past that, you're on your own. And that's what I'm hoping I'm also hearing from you, is that we don't want to be just welcoming and say anything goes, because the people of Green Bay are not going to put up with that. They're more than welcoming and giving to help with their time and money and food, any of that to get people back on their feet. But I just want to make sure that there's going to be a point that we don't go beyond. And I think I've heard that both from Ms. Wood and from you, Officer. And so I just want to, that'll be my statement for now. And hopefully that is what we see this summer, that the problems don't just spill out elsewhere. So I appreciate it.
Paul, when we're putting this together, what was the thinking behind using the code? What was the purpose of having that? Is that an intrinsic? Why was that? Can you talk about how that came about? Why that is part of the program?
I wasn't directly involved in making the code of conduct. I mean, I think that there's maybe more being made of this, other than what Alderman Brunette brought up, that it may be an issue of legality, that people can, it's what we do in one park, do we need to do it in every park? I don't know the answer to that. That's a law. But I think the program itself could be successful with or without that. I really do. So, I mean, if that's the point of consternation here, I mean, if the law department says no, that may be a constitutionality situation, I think either way, this is going to be successful. And if it bothers people, I mean, or is illegal, we can get rid of it and move on. Unless Lexi or Matt or anyone else feel different, Dan or anybody else that's part of one of the partner organizations.
Yeah, I can add to that. So the reason that it was put into the plan was so that there was some accountability for everybody who's at the park. So the thought process was that if people are going to be at the park, we would like them to participate in the program. And so by signing that agreement, they're in essence agreeing to follow the rules and in essence participate. But like Officer Van Handel stated, if that is a sticking point, I think we could eliminate that and still have a very successful program out there. And I think that we would still see a lot of benefits. It was just trying to get accountability for everybody in the park is really what the thought was behind it. The other thing that I wanted to mention was, about the possibility of, instead of running the program for the entire year or approving it for the entire year from April 30th through November 1st, I think we could also bring this back to the committee maybe halfway through the summer after a 3 or 4 month period, report to the committee and see if we want to continue the program for the rest of the season or not. So to address those two concerns, I think we could easily run the program addressing both of those concerns.
Okay, well, the only question I have then is if we did stick with this code, if someone refused, would they then not be allowed to be in the park?
Like I said before, I'll get an answer from the law department on that and get you an answer before the council meeting.
All right, okay, yeah, and then for me, if it's a tool that's helpful to engage people, fine, but I don't see it as something, when I thought of it as something, as a way to engage people, but if they didn't sign it and they were, some people, homeless may actually not sign it, but actually be drawn to the park and sort of, that first step, getting in, and they're just not ready for that, but they're there and they're obeying the rules, even though they haven't signed it. They're not a problem. That, I don't know if that'd be someone I'd want to have escorted from the park, or I didn't think that. Well, anyway, that's all I got to say on it. Was there anybody else? Alder Burnett.
Yeah, thank you. And officer, thank you for that explanation. It's still a public park. That's the main thing. It's still a public park. I like the idea of having accountability. Accountability can be achieved many ways without having someone needing to sign their name to a piece of paper. We don't ask people to sign papers to get into City Hall or the police department or the fire department or any other city entity. To think that even though it's latched to a program that now will require a certain segment of society who already feel marginalized or possibly discriminated against by the public at large, and now sign a piece of paper to be allowed entry into a city park. It doesn't sit right with me. That's the main thing. But I like the accountability piece. Officer believes that it can be achieved without this piece of paper, then that's something that I'm sure Director Ditchite will work with the law department to get some more clarification.
Alder Steele.
Chairman, is this a time sensitive issue?
They would like to start the program beginning April 30th. So there are some things that we would have to do to get ready for that program in order to accommodate them. So we would have to get the shelter ready is the primary item. So one of the things that they're looking at is providing heat and air conditioning in the shelter, and then also Wi-Fi. And those improvements would be funded through the Economic Development Office, the Community Development Office, through funding that they have, so there would be no cost to the Parks Department for that. And but it would take us time to order the equipment and get that set up.
So my comment was thank you everybody for coming tonight and talking. Greatly appreciated. But as some of the council or some of the members on this committee have questions that are unanswered. In a way, I feel like this needs to be held until the next Parks meeting, so all these answers are given, and so this committee can make the correct decision on how they want to bring this forward to the Common Council. That's why I'm asking if this is time sensitive. Jesse has some valid points. Randy, you have some valid points that aren't answered yet either. Chris Weary, he's kind of debating what he wants to do. So that's why I'm asking, is it time sensitive? It might be the best avenue is to hold this until all these answers come back to you.
I think it's sensitive, and I think the questions, I think Dan can get most of our questions answered by Tuesday. And we can, and certainly by Tuesday, if we need to refer it back to Parks, we could. So I would rather not hold it. I'd rather this go forward. And if we need to, we can refer it back, or we can take action Tuesday. Anyone else? Yeah, thank you. Anyone? I don't get.
Chris has his hand up.
And so there's Alder Gerlach.
Chris, where'd you go? Chris and then Alder Gerlach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Dan, if you could even put together kind of what the cost would be. Just it's going to be ballpark, I know, but it would be good to know if we get asked as Alder people, well, what's that costing? It might not come out of the park's pocket, but it's coming out of somebody's pocket. That would be good information to have.
And I can provide that right now, actually. So the cost of that heating air conditioning unit is, for the install price and the purchase of it, would be about $1,000. The cost for the Wi-Fi is approximately $39 a month is what that would be. Now, there would be no cost to the city budget for that because we actually have a unit out at the sanctuary that we don't need in a month from now. So we're currently using it out there, but we're locked into a 2-year commitment financially on that. So instead of just paying for it and not using it starting next month, we would in turn move that to the shelter.
Okay, thanks. Would this be the only shelter air conditioned, or do we have any other ones?
It's the only shelter that would be air conditioned, but this is a portable unit that can be moved to any other shelter at any point after this program is done.
Perfect. No, that's great. I think as Alderman Burnett said, he's willing to, move forward, at least at committee here. If we can review this, if the motion maker, Alder Gerlach's fine with bringing this back in July for kind of a halfway through look at, then I'd be fine with moving this along and endorsing it for now.
I would be happy to amend my motion to have it reviewed in July.
Okay, and Alder Burnett will second that?
Yes,
Still?
sir. Yes.
And then Alder Gerlach, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yes, please, I would. I just want to go, I can live without this making people sign something if necessary, if that becomes a problem. But I guess I want to just present it in a different way. Picture me walking into that park with my grandchildren. Now, granted, my youngest grandchild is about to be 13, so none of my grandchildren go to a park with me. But let's say they did. Let's say they were little. I walk in and I see this program going on, and this is how I envision it. A nice, friendly person comes to me and says, "Ma'am, we have a new program we're trying here this summer, and we're just asking everybody to be aware of what the basic park rules are in Green Bay. No alcohol and no drugs. Are you willing to just sign this to say that you abide by that?" And I say, "Well, of course," and then my children can go play. I just think that we're acting like we're asking them to sign something really outrageous, but maybe that part isn't going to work. I really think that this is time sensitive. I thank you, Alder Scannell, for trying to move it forward because they're trying to launch this April 30th, and this is a brand new thing. It's got a lot of moving parts. If you read that proposal, they've put so much work into this. This has the potential to be a real solution to a real problem. And I'd like to give them some really enthusiastic support and say, go for it and try it. Report back to us in July. Let's move it forward and move on.
And I guess the one thing that I do want to comment on that I forgot to mention when you asked about the timing for this, the hope and the reason that April 30th was selected was to get this put in place before the weather gets too nice and patrons start camping in the park again. So the sooner we can begin the program, the better off we are. In addition, the homeless shelter does have to find staffing for this also. So, the longer we push this back, the more difficulties we're going to have actually making it successful. So.
Okay, thank you. Well, I unless there's something else from somebody, I don't see anything, but I don't see every screen. Anybody see anything I'm not seeing? We've got a motion and we've got a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. Now I gotta get back to.
Are we ready for the next item?
Let me know when we're all set.
Okay, it'll just be a moment.
That's fine.
Okay, we are set. Thank you.
Yep. Item number 2, consideration with possible action on awarding NEW Landscape and Lawn Care the annual weed control contract for an amount not to exceed $33,821.85. Staff?
Yeah, so on an annual basis, the Parks Department quotes out weed control through a vendor that specializes in this type of work. We recently worked with the purchasing department to quote out the work again this year. Previously, Beck's, they have been the low quote for many years, so we've been working with them to do this work throughout our park system for numerous years. And in this situation, 3 companies provided the quote. New Landscape and Lawn Care was the low quote at $33,821, which is approximately $3,800 cheaper than Beck's quote. And we do have enough allocated in our 2021 budget to cover the cost for this work. So we've never worked with New Landscape and Lawn Care before in the past, but we are willing to give it a try this year and see how it goes. And we have no reason to believe that they're not capable of doing a good job for us and managing the work appropriately. And in addition, this was the only company out of the 3 that quoted that have agreed to keep their price consistent throughout 2022 and 2023 if we opt to renew their contracts over the next 2 years. So I would recommend approving or awarding this to New Landscape and Lawn Care. And I'm just seeing, we had our purchasing agent online, but it doesn't look like he's here anymore. So do you have any questions for me?
I'll move to, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think it might have been just an oversight, but I didn't see my address listed for the lawn care.
That was an oversight.
Okay,
That
okay.
was
They're gonna pull all your weeds one by one.
All right, then I'm in favor. Yeah.
No, I think they're going to fumigate. It'll be a fog. They'll say, "Where's Alder Weary's house?"
They say Aldermary's always in a fog.
I shouldn't have got Randy started. Oh, no, they're tag teaming. Motion to approve. Bailing.
Second.
Okay, motion by Alder Weary, seconded by Alder Burnett. Do we know what kind of chemicals or anything are used with? Do we have any standards with that with the city? Do we look into any of that or?
These are standard weed control products that are available, commercial grade. So it's nothing out of the ordinary that other communities and residences don't use.
Okay, all right. Any questions or comments? Motion made by Alder Weary, seconded by Alder Burnett. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously.
Let me know when you're ready. Okay, we're set for the next item.
Okay, we're on to informational. Staff update on the FET fire biking at Haynisra Park. I know Alder Burnett just doesn't care about this. Maybe we should skip it.
I've had all the big issues in my district this year, so I need a bit of a break.
So
Want a pool?
as you all can tell, the snow is gone now and will hopefully remain that way until next winter, but we'll see what happens in the next few weeks. So we did have our first focus group meeting that started on March 15th. So there were members from each user group that participated in this meeting. So members included cross-country skiers, walkers and hikers, neighborhood association, a resident. Alderman Brunette was at that meeting. Someone from the neighborhood was at that meeting, and also a representative from the community at large. So in total, there were 11 members total at that meeting. And I was not at that meeting. James Anderson handled that, and he couldn't be here to talk about this project today. But my understanding is that the meeting went very well, and everyone had a chance to talk about their experience with the trails thus far. And, you know, if Alderman Brunette would like to expand on that, he can. But there is a second focus group meeting scheduled for March 29th. And at this meeting, the hope would be to discuss other potential areas for fat tire biking on the west side of Green Bay. And also, we hope to have discussions to discuss potential trail modifications or improvements that the committee as a whole or the focus group would suggest to the trail system at Haynisra Park. So then after that second focus group meets, we'll have a discussion with Alderman Burnett and determine if another public input meeting is necessary. And if so, we can plan one for either April or May to find a resolution to this issue. So that's really all I have to add. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Alderman Burnett.
Yeah, Director Ditch, I thank you for your leadership. And James, I think the way that this has been handled the last month or two has been outstanding. And so I'm very grateful. Just for the sake of the committee, the main issue that keeps coming up that has the most tension, and I saw it during this meeting a week or two ago, was this idea of allowing this park to be a destination. Like right now we can accommodate the trail use, but the concerns that the neighbors have, as do I, that if we promote or we allow outside groups to promote Hinasra to larger groups outside of the city, from a tourism, people using the parks, makes complete sense that you would want to, attract wider user groups. But for the folks who use it daily, that's the main concern. And so ideas I had that I've talked to James and Dan is that maybe we regulate it in some way. Like we work with the groups to say, if you're going to have a large group ride, seek permission from the city, or if you have a planned group ride, clear it with the neighborhood in a variety of ways. So that's just nothing we need to get into necessarily right now, but that's the main sticking point, the most controversial thing. Okay, we can accommodate bikes now, but if we allow regional attractions and we can have like 100 bikers show up over a 2 or 3 hour period of time, that's the thing that the neighbors are most concerned about. So.
Anybody else got anything to add? Questions? Anything? I'll take a motion to receive and place on file.
Move to receive and place on file.
Second.
So moved by Alder Weary, seconded by Alder Net. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that is received and place it on fire. On file. I'm tired. Are we on to director's report?
Yes, we're ready for you.
On to director's report.
So really, I just have two things to add that I forgot to include in the director's report. One is the Blue Ribbons. They're the user group that has been using the Joanne Stadium last year. So they submitted their 30-game home schedule for Joanne Stadium again this year. Their season will run from May 26th through July 31st. So we're excited that they'll be utilizing that facility, and games will proceed there again this year. Also, the second item is I forgot to mention that Ducks Unlimited will start construction on a fish habitat project at Ken Ewers Park, and that will begin sometime over the next few weeks. So I believe I discussed this, I can't recall if I discussed this at Park Committee or not, but just to give you a summary, they did receive a DNR permit along with grant dollars to, in essence, place a series of logs within the bay. So these submerged logs will provide the necessary habitat to improve the fish populations in the bay. The reason that the Parks Department is involved is because this is happening just north of the wetland that they built at Ken Ewers. So the only approvals that they needed from the city was to grant them access to the bay with their construction equipment. So they'll be taking their trucks down along that wetland that they built, and they will haul the logs out that way. And then I believe they're going to put them out there with a barge. So that's kind of the game plan moving forward, and you should see that happening soon. And then just to kind of give you a recap on Ken Ewers as a whole, so we have done a considerable amount of work in that park over the last 3 to 5 years to continue to improve that park. So past projects that have been completed include the installation of the managed wetland for waterfowl habitat just east of the parking lot. A few years ago, we also coordinated with the Bay Area Regional Planning Commission to eradicate the Phragmites on site. And the recent high water conditions also drastically helped to keep the Phragmites population under control. We've worked cooperatively with the police department to clear all of the underbrush along the wooded paths to the west of the parking lot. And then finally, DPW is either in the process of planting prairie grasses on the landfill just south of the parking lot, or they completed that last year. I can't recall. I'd have to bases with them, but that is the game plan to plant prairie grasses there to improve habitat where the landfill is currently located. And then we're working with Ducks Unlimited to see if we can secure additional grant dollars to turn the pond area to the west of the parking lot into another managed waterfowl habitat project, similar to the one that was installed last year. So there's no funding for that now, but we're looking to secure engineering grants for that. And then also, we're going to, possible future projects that we're also exploring is the installation of an observation tower, possibly moving the parking lot, possibly adding an entrance gate, or increase the lighting and updating security cameras at that facility. So those are all projects that we'd like to kind of look at funding for and see what the possibilities are and continue to improve that park. So, yes, Alderman Weary.
Alderman Weary?
Thanks. Yeah, question for you about that park, Dan. I think it's going to be a real gem over there. The entranceway. I went out there twice last year, and whew, you got to batten down the hatches.
Yeah.
You know, to get from the entranceway in. Is there anything we can do to kind of smooth it out a little bit?
Yeah, we can talk about that. On a yearly basis, that happens every winter. So we usually go in there with grading equipment and we level it out or add a little bit of gravel to that drive. So I'll touch bases with Public Works and see what we can do about that in the near future. I wasn't aware that that was an issue again.
Yeah, it was last fall. It would have been probably late summer. And after that, I'm like, I don't even want to risk going out here. But the second thing is, how is it looking for lifeguards? Never too early to start looking.
We are definitely being very proactive. I will tell you right now that, you know, we're not having a lot of luck right now, but we're not at the crunch point yet. We know that lifeguarding is going to be an issue, but truthfully, all of our summertime staffing is going to be an issue, not just lifeguarding. So we're kind of low on applicants right now across the board for all of our recreation programs, for Bay Beach, for our park maintenance workers. So hopefully that'll pick up. But I will tell you that our pool specialist, Ann Muller, is working very diligently to recruit new lifeguards to our program. So hopefully we'll be able to operate back to normal again.
Okay, Alder Burnett?
Ian, can we increase the pay scale to the maximum it can go? Normally I'm a budget hawk, but man, we need those pools open, and I think it would be a very acceptable thing to the public to pay top dollar so we can ensure all those pools get open.
Yeah, and right now that's not in our budget to increase that. Could we look at that to be more competitively? That's something we're definitely going to do for next year's budget cycle. I think if we're going to kind of wait it out another week or two and see if we're successful with getting more applicants coming in with the approach we're taking. And that may be something that we bring to the park committee in the near future, seeing if we can increase those rates for this year. But right now, we're hopeful that we can find enough lifeguards to make it work for this year. But I think across the board, we're going to have to look at seasonal salaries, not just lifeguard salaries, in next year's budget.
Well, we're getting $25 million, so we should earmark some of that so the public can have that use of their facilities. I think that would be a huge quality of life addition. And so anyways, I know you'll do a good job, but I just don't want to get too far behind the other municipalities. We have to think of it like we're competing for the best talent. So.
Yeah, with the earmarks too, as chair, I got big ears, so. Alder Gerlach?
Question, how old do you have to be a lifeguard for Green Bay?
I think James is a better person to ask than I on that. I don't know the exact age, but I know it's definitely over 16. But beyond that,
that's too bad, because I have a lovely 15-year-old granddaughter down in Missouri who is a champion swimmer, and she wants to be a lifeguard this summer. And I would invite her to come up and live with me so she could be a lifeguard for you. But she's not going to be 16 for a while.
I will get you a definite answer, and if we can make that work, we'll call.
I believe she could get a job lifeguarding in Columbia, Missouri at 15. So you got to be competitive.
Okay.
But I want to just make sure the committee knows that what James Anderson did for us related to Kent Ewers Park. Yeah. Alder Stevens and I both heard some negative comments, very negative comments about Kent Ewers Park and about the park staff taking care of it. And so I contacted, I think, Director Ditch and Assistant Director Anderson, and told them of my concerns. I also went online and started looking at what people say about it, and I found as many positive things as negative things. But James actually met us out there. I'd never been there before. Alder Stevens had never been there before. And he showed us around and he explained to us what had been done, what they think needs to be done and all. And so we really appreciated that. I just felt a lot better about it. And then he went on to schedule a meeting with the police department to talk about the issues in the park. So I asked him the other day if he's feeling good about it, and he said yes. So I just wanted to share that with you because the parks staff always does such a great job.
Thank you.
Anything else from anyone? Director, finished?
Yes, that's all I have.
Motion to receive and place on file.
Received and placed on file by Alder Burnett.
Second.
Seconded by Alder Gerlach. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It is received and placed on file. Our next park committee meeting is April 14th, 2021. Be there or be square. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Second.
Motion by Alder Burnett, seconded by Alder Gerlach. All in favor?
Aye.
And Alder Weary, when are we going to get together?
7:15, okay, that gives a nice 9-minute cushion to,
Yep, that works for Assistant Director Burnett.
okay, perfect. Then we'll see you a quarter after.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye.
Thanks, Dan.